Working with a group of people who were very, very young, very, very connected, very, very interesting, and a group of older people who were very, very young and very, very interesting. I got told by somebody who is many years my senior that I was behaving like an old-fashioned and describing something like an old-fashioned baby boomer. The fact that I was describing Dennis's analogy at the beginning between would we like our children to be playing Call of Duty or reading a book, I suggested perhaps Call of Duty or playing a sport might be the comparison. I can't imagine that Call of Duty would teach the same sort of morals in business that you get from reading a good novel set in the 15th century France, Three Musketeers or something like that. So I'm sorry, I can't agree that Call of Duty and reading a good book is the same sort of education. However, having been told that, we had a very interesting mix of people in our group. I won't go into the first session, but you can see the sort of ramblings that we went on. We had one of the best discussions that I could imagine. I don't think anybody else had it. We talked about language diversity. It might have been because we had a languages professor in our group, and she was worried that because we are all going onto this social media, then the language diversity, do we like it? Do we want to keep it? We're Europeans. We have a diverse set of languages, and maybe that helps us become more creative if we can all talk and think in our own language. And of course, many others shot her down and said, I'm sorry Rita, don't agree with you, English is great. And I wasn't one who said that. English is great. And anyway, on Facebook you can always click translate and you can talk in your own language. And we agreed that there was actually a common Jade language, and all of my Jade friends on Facebook, they speak the same common Jade language, whichever party they're describing, you can see, and whichever language it's actually written in, I can see the same message. If I click translate, I can see what you've been up to. So we talked about language, that was interesting. Also then about the cultural layers around that. We'll be able to replace. I got into, again, the same sort of thing. Groups can work together at a certain level of understanding remotely, but however well you work together remotely, getting together face to face is the way to do business in so many parts of the world and so many cultures, and we don't think it'll be replaced. Somebody also said, hey, if you disagree that the Google translation engines are any good, or the Facebook translation engine are any good, imagine what it was like 2 years ago, and they were very bad, and they're moving very, very fast. So however poorly we think they work at the moment, it's not very long before they'll be very, very good, and language professors might be like the rest of us middle managers and finding ourselves squeezed out. Okay. So we talked about that, and as an example of how quickly technology is moving, I think Dick pointed out 3D printing. I don't think anybody would have expected technology to have developed in the 3D printing direction as fast as it has, so all sorts could happen. So that was the first one. The second one, the main one I want to talk about, nice orthogonal lines. I'm an engineer. Okay, there were random post-it notes, we've clustered them together. We wanted to look at two great case studies from Kurt's last example. An example of leading by influencing and not by hierarchy, and we think there's going to be more of this in open collaboration communities, more and more of this. We think that Kurt gave us a great example of indirect leadership, basically taking a tool that had been bought for one purpose, looking at what it can do, and then persuading people this was a really good idea to pick up themselves, talking, finding his way around the other influences in the organisation, getting people to adopt it slowly and virally, rather than going in and saying, I want €1 million and I really can't tell you what the benefits are. Okay, so I don't think he did that. Of course, getting the CEO on board was one thing, but then that's just selling and influencing skill, I think, that you're going to have to learn. And I think that in delivering that, an example that we will be seeing more, leadership indirectly, leadership by influencing is going to be an increasing skill, we think, in the future. We also looked at, therefore, in Kurt's tool, it provided a direct leadership tool for the CEO. And the CEO now has at his disposal a tool for communicating. As we heard from Kurt, that gives us lots of different benefits. It brings social capabilities into the company, so it's no longer hierarchy, it's content which gives you credibility. And that then means that necessarily the CEO has to develop a whole set of different skills. Or actually, let's be fair, the leader who is leading in an environment where there are these tools. It's not just the CEO who has to do it, although that's the example that Kurt gave. What are the skills? The leadership skills that we came on. One is creating, building and maintaining a social profile. We can see a workshop coming on that, I'm sure, onto the programme in the near future when those sort of practices come out. I think it's something that we don't need to do at the moment, but how you maintain that, how you look after that is something that's going to be important. Feedback was a useful tool to test the direction that the CEO is wanting to go. That's interesting because we heard this morning from Dennis that we're not used to getting feedback in that generation, we're not expecting it. So we're going to have an exercise, or a skill development exercise for us to get used to accepting feedback. And if we also use these tools, we're going to have a whole host of leading distributed virtual multicultural teams type exercises. We're going to need those skills, and that requires a heck of a lot of influencing and selling skills. It also allows, because it allows people, a manager who is managing, a leader who is leading a team of multicultural distributed people with these sorts of tools are going to have to get used to the fact you can't keep an eye on what everybody does all of the time. And because you don't have the information that used to tell people what they were going to do, you don't see that anymore. They've cut you out of the loop. So you've got to develop trust. You've got to develop a way of measuring, monitoring what people are doing that isn't intrusive and isn't done by the information that you give them. And that means you're going to have to get used to tolerating, tolerating persons working on things other than what they should be working on. Provided it's adding value to the organisation, they can find a way of doing that, and in doing that it helps them extend their network, enhance their credibility, then that's a skill that they're going to have to develop, and you're going to have to get used to letting them get on with it. An ability to make time to respond to people. If you've posted questions, or people have posted questions, you're going to have to answer them. If you don't answer them, it's back to this side. We've started to lose the idea of our reputation that we've put on the web if we don't respond. So we're going to have to try and find ways to make time. And then with another comment that said there is a risk, if you condition employees to expect transparency and then they ask you a question that you really don't want to respond to. That's quite a highly developed leadership communication skill that is going to be needed by the leader to try and maintain his reputation for transparency without giving anything away. I suggest he watches any interview of any politician when asked a difficult question. Okay. Communicating transparently seems to be a really high one. There's another one that we did talk about when we were looking at the futures, and this was because we were lucky to have Dick in our organisation, in our team. And we're talking about contracts, and CB&I do a lot of work building things, and they need contracts with every one of their suppliers and sub-suppliers, and they're working to a contract for their clients. And we just thought, if everybody actually does go into Heather's world of open source and crowdsourcing of innovation, and you design something like a car or like a gas plant, where do the liabilities sit? What about the contractual issues that at the moment these guys have only got half a dozen tens of contracts in any job? When they get up to thousands of contracts with the thousands of suppliers that we're going to have in these resilient organisations, the lawyers are going to make a fortune out of our social media developments. And we're not sure what that means for how you hold and handle risk in a contractual relationship in that sort of an environment. I think that's something that we would like to think more about before we just say that that's a natural way of things going. It might form a very real barrier for our types of industries. Thank you very much to the group. I really enjoyed working with you, and that's, I hope that's a reasonable summary of what we've been talking about. Thank you.